Welcome to New Realities. I'm Alan Steinfeld, and I'm very happy to have back on my program Marilyn Schlitz, and she's just completed a beautiful movie, a very beautiful movie called Death Makes Life Possible.
The key to the conquest of death is to find out who you are.
And she's an old-time member of IONS, the Institute of Noetic Science. What's your title there?
President Emeritus and Senior Fellow.
Which means what, actually?
Means I don't have to do a lot of their work anymore.
But
I'm independent and able to be an ambassador for the message around noetic sciences, but really be free to do some independent projects.
like this film, which is, it's a very intense sort of film because people, I mean, there are films about death, but this, you know, you go right into it. I mean, was it a difficult film to make, or was it something you were really curious about and needed to do?
Yeah, it's something I've been working on for a long time, and I had some interviews I had done in the course of my research on transformations in worldview. As you might recall, I've done, you know, hours and hours and hours of interviews with masters from different world traditions, spiritual practices, and looking at transformation. How is it that we change and grow in pro-social positive ways? And one of the big questions that we didn't address when we published that work in the Living Deeply book is this transformation into death. And so I went back and read some of the interviews and began to collect more interviews with scientists, spiritual teachers, kids, people from all walks of life. And I was at a course that Deepak was teaching shortly after David Simon had his cancer diagnosis. And I showed a short clip of this set of interviews, and Deepak called me aside afterward and said, "Marilyn, you know, let's make a movie." And I thought, oh my gosh, who doesn't want to make a movie with Deepak Chopra? Right. So I went to bed all happy, and the next morning I woke up in a kind of panic, and I thought, no, I just can't take this on. It's just too big an effort, too much fundraising, all the things that go into it. So I had lunch with him that day and said, you know, I'm really grateful, but I just can't do it. And he said, "Oh, Marilyn, don't worry about the money will come." And so I trusted that, and it wasn't quite that simple, but it did happen. We had a couple of individuals who stepped up, a couple of foundations. We did a couple of successful Kickstarter campaigns, and in that process, we're, you know, able to collect these really beautiful stories and insights that people have about death, dying, and the possibility of what comes after.
In coma, it's a different universe.
I had no sense of concern, no anxiety. I just found myself exploring. It was boundless, vista after vista after vista, one environment leading seamlessly to the next.
It's a very moving film. A big part of the film is your interview with that guy who dies. What's his name?
Lee Lipsenthal.
Yeah, Lee Lipsenthal. And because he's so present on the film. I mean, you can't believe, is this guy really going to die? Because, I mean, I guess like all of us, we're so present until we're not, you know. But his presence is very powerful, and he doesn't look like he's about to die. I guess he does, but, you know, he's so conscious and aware.
I'm 53 years old and was told about 5 weeks ago that I'm dying. I'm not suffering with this. I suffer with physical discomfort. The pain is not fun. Pain sucks. But dying doesn't. Dying is just what we do.
What did you learn from that interview? I mean, and from the whole process in general, what was your own awakening in this filmmaking?
Well, I think that there is a general fear or even terror around death and a denial about our mortality. And I think that that denial ends up leading to a lot of very aberrant behaviors toward ourselves, toward others. And the idea that there were groups of people from many different traditions who seemed to have transcended that fear, who have overcome their own disquiet around their mortality, was a great gift, honestly. You know, the opportunity to really see people who had been able to work through that.
Clearly, the cross-cultural evidence suggests that people all over the world and throughout history have thought that consciousness is more than just our physical being. Different religions, different cultural groups have created practices to honor that transition.
I think experience helps us, you know, gain that sort of knowledge. So are you totally convinced now that there is consciousness after the body?
I think for myself, I'm an anthropologist by training. I have a deep reverence for pluralism, the idea that there are many different belief systems, worldviews, and that in a certain sense there's something true about all of them. And it may possibly be that there are multiple answers to that question. Maybe it's not all just one thing or another. So for myself, I think there's this appreciation for the literature on reincarnation, for example. Very provocative. We go into that in the film. Yeah. You know, these mediums who claim to talk to the departed. Again, there are data that support this in a very compelling way. So that's interesting. I think for myself, it's more a kind of non-dual state. I think that we are all in this kind of semi-permeable place all the time, and that there are multiple realities, multiple perspectives on life. And that feels true to me. That feels like, you know, there may be ways in which we can transition into a different dimension. Does that mean our personality survives bodily death? Maybe for some people it does, maybe for others it doesn't. I think the scariest part about death is, you know, the feeling of leaving others behind. And I think if we can make peace with our relationships, with, you know, forgiving ourselves for our misdeeds, forgiving others, making sure that if we have children, that the children are cared for. I think once those sort of basic needs are taken care of, the transition to death is less scary.
Right. Of course, once those needs are taken care of, that's when we really can begin to live, you know. I mean, there's that whole thing, you know what I'm saying? Once we are in that place of comfort, then, you know, I think that kind of paving the way for death also shows us how we can live more fully. So it's like we can say death is a mystery because there is no definitive answer, but life is a mystery too. I mean, consciousness is a mystery. And so I think what the film does is show us that anybody's guess is as good as anybody else's, and everybody's experience is valuable. I totally believe those mediums, and I've seen them, they can't be, they're definitely not making this up. They're tapped into something, whether it's your own field or they're actually making contact. There's a real phenomena that's undeniable.
Well, I think, you know, the title of the film, Death Makes Life Possible, is really the intention. I think as we can gain greater death awareness, as we can make peace with the inevitability of our mortality, then it imbues our life with greater purpose and possibility. We can, you know, really discover who we are and live into that in the fullest realm of possibility. So it is a gift, I think, to be able to embrace the cycle of life and our place in it.
So how have you been changed by making this movie and, you know, documenting these stories? How has your worldview shifted, I guess I'm at? Or maybe it hasn't, I don't know.
Well, I've been deep into all of these kinds of different traditions for a long time, for decades, really. But what's changed for me is my whole life. I, you know, had a job. I've been working in foundations for my entire career. I was at the Institute of Noetic Sciences for 22 years. The idea of going out on my own and working on this venture working from home, having, the freedoms, and also the trepidations that come when you don't have a whole team around you at all time. Right. That was a big sort of life transition, and it's been a liberation in a lot of ways. I'm grateful to the Institute of Noetic Sciences. I'm grateful to the Chopra Foundation for, standing up and supporting this work. And I'm also really delighted that I've been able to make a very smooth transition into, my own becoming. And that's what it feels like. It feels like a new beginning.
Great. Congratulations. But, what would you like other people to get? What was your hope in showing people this film?
Well, I have the film, and then there's a book by the same title, Death Makes Life Possible, and a series of educational programs that we're about to roll out. And in the book, I'm able to do a kind of more deep dive into some of the theoretical aspects of what this project is about. And in particular, I was, really captivated by Ernest Becker's work on the denial of death and the generativity of his work, where now there have been hundreds of studies looking at what's called terror management theory. The idea that if we don't deal with our terror, our core fear around death, then it leads to these aberrant behaviors. And they've documented this in study after study after study, where you can see that if somebody is in denial and they get triggered by some kind of what they call a mortality salience prompt, what happens is that people can become very insulated toward their in-group, those people who share their value system, and then very aggressive and hostile toward the out-group, those people who are different from us. And so for me...
Like Republicans, you mean? No.
It's what?
Like I said, like Republicans.
Whatever the other is in our little construction.
Yes, yes.
And if that's it for you, okay.
Okay.
Often we look at, the wars that are happening, religious wars, conflicts. But it can happen. One study, for example, was done with judges who were assigning the penalty for bail for prostitutes. And half of the judges were treated normally, and half of them were given a mortality salience prompt just before the decision was made. And what they found is significant differences in the amount of bail that was set, so that those people who had not had the trigger were fairer and gave a lower amount for the bail, whereas those judges who had been triggered with this mortality salience prompt became more harsh and more retribution oriented.
Really? I would think it would be the opposite, because, if they're challenged with their own mortality, they might, be more lenient on other people. Why did it...
The twist in it is that so what I said is true, but what happens in order for people to overcome that aggression is to work on self-esteem, to have a sense of positive meaning in their lives. So if you can bolster people's self-esteem, not just give them the trigger, but give them some coping skills, then that observation reverses. So I like to advocate, death awareness for peace, because I think that there's really something fundamental for all of us, not only in how we live our lives as individuals, but how we live with each other. And in particular, in this multicultural, pluralistic world, how it is that we can come to a deeper appreciation for the alternative lifestyles and the different ways of expressing our, beautiful unfolding.
I get that. There's one piece in the film I wish you would have followed a little more, because you go and talk to Dean Radin, who's an amazing researcher, and he says, we have hooked up electrodes to these mediums' brains to see what's activated when they go into these states where they're speaking to dead people.
Many people believe that they can communicate with the dead. We call them mediums. We want to study in the laboratory what is happening in the brains of mediums while they say they're in communication with a departed person.
I wanted to know the results of that study. Can you tell, what happened?
Yeah, the great thing is that we finished this film.
Yeah.
It would have been great to have another 6 months and another $100,000
Right.
to really be able to dig into some of these, unanswered questions.
Yeah.
That particular study was not done at the time when we did the filming, but has since been completed.
Mm-hmm.
And Arnaud Delorme, who's a French neuroscientist,
Mm-hmm.
was the lead on that experiment. And what they found is that in the brain of these mediums, during the periods when the content or information that's coming through the mediums is deemed to be correct,
Mm-hmm.
something in the memory area of the brain kind of opens up. It's like there's more space created for a new set of memories. That's very provocative and obviously needs to be followed up, replicated.
Well, we're just calling it the memory part of the brain, and who knows what it really is, because it seems like if this is true, and I do think it's true from what I've experienced, there's must be a multi-dimensional aspect to the brain that, of course, is not acknowledged by Western science, but people like Dean Radin, who was really, I think, one of the foremost important scientists of our time, is working in those areas to show there's a non-local awareness that we house somehow in our local embodiment. So I'd just love to see more experiments in that area.
Yeah, it definitely needs to be done, and I think that with the work and the courage of people like Dean and others at the Institute of Noetic Sciences and University of Virginia in Charlottesville, they're doing some really provocative work on the reincarnation. Peter Fenwick over in England. There are a group of people who are really in a very diligent and rigorous way attempting to understand this mystery of consciousness and the extended reaches that our mind, body, spirit can move through.
Right, because I think if we understand consciousness, we'll have a little better understanding of life and death and life. So I'm excited about, where people like you and the Institute of Noetic Science are moving, and people like Deepak Chopra, of course, who is really at the forefront of these kind of brain consciousness, mind issues, and these. And I think at some point there'll be a real breakthrough in saying, look, we can access information. So I'm happy you did this beautiful film. I think it's a really powerful statement, and I guess it leaves you, in a way, it leaves me with more questions than answers.
Well, that was the goal, so I feel like I've accomplished something if that's the case. And what we're really excited about today is this opportunity to take it out to the audience of the Oprah Winfrey Network. Oprah picked it up, so that's really a privilege. The film has been in festivals and community screenings all over the world. We've been to India, Israel, all through Asia, Europe, now South America, North America. And so that's been really just delightful to watch how people are responding, how deeply people are touched by this opportunity to have conversation. So the film kind of acts as a tool or a catalyst for this kind of deep inquiry. But now with this Oprah Winfrey premiere, we'll be able to reach out to a very broad audience of people who might not have the chance to get to a community screening or, a private viewing. So this feels like a privilege. And, my goal really is to help ignite a conversation. People, because of the fear, because of the taboo, often don't know how to talk to their loved ones. And what we know from the statistics is that, most people have a particular idea of what they want at the end of life. And yet, because they don't feel free or empowered to have the conversation, or because the family members are, afraid to broach these topics with somebody who's near death, oftentimes people don't have their wishes at the end manifest. And I think that's a tragedy. So to the extent we can use this film, we can use the book, we can use the educational programs, we can participate in a movement that really is up right now. You know, we have the death cafes and the death salons, the Conversation Project, the Dining with Death. You know, death is up. And so I think the film, Death Makes Life Possible, offers another tool for us in order to begin to heal something that has been deeply ruptured in our culture.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you. So the thing about the Oprah Winfrey Network, it will be shown regularly?
Well, she's licensed it for a year, and so it will be shown several times over the course of the year. I don't think that's been scheduled yet. Hopefully people like it. Hopefully people let people at Oprah's network know that they want more programming like that.
And what's the website for the film?
It's deathmakeslifepossible.com. And there's all kinds of interesting material and ways to get involved for people.
So this is your little baby right now. Congratulations. Good luck.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate your work. I appreciate you being, you know, a conduit for bringing these ideas out into the world. It's definitely necessary, and you do a great job of it. So thank you.
Thanks, Marilyn. Thanks. I'm talking to Marilyn Schlitz, who's the, would you say you're the producer and director of this film?
I'm the executive producer. Our director is Mark Krigbaum of Petaluma Pictures, and I also wrote the film.
Great. Thanks for everything. This is Alan Steinfeld for Newrealities, and thanks for watching today.
And the lamp that lit my dark corner is out. A summons has come, and I'm ready for my journey.